In a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other, there lived a lonely man named Alexei. He was always a bit strange. He liked to wander around abandoned places and collect strange artifacts. His fascination with history gave him the opportunity to immerse himself in a world full of mysticism and mysteries. But one day he came across an old diary in one of the abandoned estates, which completely changed his life. The diary belonged to a woman named Maria, who lived in this house at the beginning of the 20th century. She described her fears and nightmares related to some ancient ritual. The records mention macabre rites requiring human sacrifice for an entity summoning other beings. Alexei, fascinated by this story, decides to try to carry out one of the rituals, believing that this is just fiction. One moonlit night, he prepared everything he needed: animal blood, candles, an altar, and the diary itself. As he began to cast spells, he felt the shadows begin to change around him. They seemed to come to life, moved, and soon whispers were heard in the room. However, of course, nothing happened. Only a cold wind broke the silence. The next day, returning home, Alexei noticed that his neighbors had become strange. They stopped smiling and avoided his gaze. Soon after, mysterious disappearances began to occur in the city. First, one of Alexei's acquaintances disappeared, then several more, and soon fear reigned in the town. Alexei couldn't help but notice the connection between his experiments and the events taking place. He tried to throw the diary away, but somehow it ended up in his hands again. With each new reading of the rituals, it became more and more frightening. Something that could not be described in words befell him. One night, heavy footsteps and loud bangs on the door were heard in his apartment. Alexei's heart began to beat in panic. When he opened the door, his neighbors were standing on the threshold with crazy eyes. They were covered in blood. Their faces contorted as if they were possessed. "You have to come with us," one of them shouted, grabbing Alexei by the wrist. He felt like a force he couldn't control was pulling him into madness. The next night was a nightmare that could not be forgotten. Alexei turned out to be at a ceremony related to sacrifices. Obsessed neighbors were circling around him, their voices merging into an eerie chorus. He realized that the ritual had come to life and turned against him. The power he summoned was relentless. The next morning, the whole city woke up in horror. The houses were abandoned. The streets looked like after a battle. Recently, Alexei's familiar house was empty, and creepy signs were emblazoned on its walls. No one knew what had happened. Only an old diary, forgotten somewhere in the attic of the manor, could tell the story of how curiosity led to the tragedy. Since then, no one in this town dares to enter abandoned houses. Fear of the unknown has become a part of their lives. And somewhere in the shadow of an old tree, victims gather again to continue their eerie ritual, forever sealed in the memory of this place.